Talk about one thing you try to teach your players besides basketball. So you're trying to reach these players, but is there one or two things that you try to teach them besides the game, and how would you do that?
I say have respect for the game, play it like you respect it. And people are to look to you and what kind of player are you. That's a reflection on the whole club and the school. So I'd say probably that. Excuse me, I got a voice.
I think that's pretty true, and I think that that your demeanor, your actions, and so on, is probably going to reflect in the players themselves. I mean, I would hope that if you keep your cool and so on, it would help them to do the same thing. And so I guess to try to be a good example for your players would be a big thing.
Yeah, I think the thing I emphasize later on in my coaching is the idea that effort is key. You can have bad shooting, you can be a great shooter and you'll have a bad night, or you can be a great rebounder, but that isn't going well either. But your effort is something you control. You know, that's something that you have the ability to and the will to say, your effort will be always at this level. That's the maximum. You don't have the ups and the downs. And so we just talk a lot about that, about effort, and try to teach kids a little bit about controlling your effort and being aware of how am I doing? You know, how am I producing effort-wise? So I think that was a big thing for me as a coach.
I think an important part of coaching with regard to players is to understand that they're all different. And if you start getting into a format where you're treating everybody the same, I think you may lose some kids in terms of their interest and coachability. And I found that out over my years, that trying to understand their feelings, their personality, what makes them more intense or more aggressive or more focused. And I can remember, you guys probably remember Todd Anderson, the big center I had that went to Duke. And he was raw, but he could board and score if you didn't play him right. And I don't know, we're having a halftime that's not going real good because we're either close game or behind, and we're not used to that with the big guy. And I knew Todd was a teddy bear to some extent. And on the other hand, somehow I'd get him going. And I recall going up to him at halftime and saying, "Todd, where's number 44? I don't see him out there." And Todd looked down at his number, and he said, "That's me." You know, pretty naive.
You sure he went to Duke?
So I said, "I got to see more of 44. You're not on either end of the floor. I don't see you." And let's get it going or whatever. So the game ends up good. We end up winning the ball game and everything. And he came up to me after the ball game, almost in tears, and said, "Coach, I just want to thank you because I really needed that." Now, if you do that to some other player, you'll get a different reaction. You won't get the same reaction.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's important in our coaching, and I found that out, to be able to adjust to how each player reacts to your directions.
I don't know if I read something on John Wooden, but he talked about kind of being a coach is part psychologist. It's like what you're saying, right? Trying to know which buttons to press to, you know, some kids you pat on the back, some kids you kick in the butt. And do you agree with that? Part of it's kind of being a psychologist to a degree?
Oh, I think
Absolutely,
so.
absolutely.
The story about Wooden was when he had Bill Walton. Remember when that?
Oh, yeah.
He came in for his first year, and of course his hair was down to his shoulders. And Wooden, he was one of my favorites. I remember up at I think it was Bemidji Clinic, he was a clinician. And he would sit right with the wives and us and talk at a table afterwards. And I just thought he was a wonderful man. But he looked at Bill and said, I understand you like to have your hair long and you enjoy having it that way and your friends and everything, but he says, you know, we're really going to miss you around here.
He's an All-American.
So Bill got the message from Coach Wooden.
How has coaching affected your life?
Wow.
It detracts from every aspect of your life. You know, it does. The way you think about it, it never leaves you. It's always something related to your coaching or your sport in the back of your mind. You should be thinking about the class you're going to teach, or you should be putting your emphasis in spending time with your kids, or it influences and detracts from your sex life. I mean, it just occupies. It just occupies. I can't speak for everybody, but
Yeah, they got to answer that question themselves.
but I mean, it becomes pervasive in your life. It's just everything, you know. And you try to keep things in balance, and you know, for the most part, you can do that at our level in high school. But it's the reason why I say that, because I can remember a principal we had. She asked me, "What's coaching like? And why do you like it? Why don't you like it? And is it take a lot of time?" You know, and ask some naive questions. And so I started thinking, and I started just responding like here. And you know, I really do think, you know, it does detract from things that are important too. But you know, so you learn to balance it. I mean, you can't ignore everything else and just do basketball. So, but I think some have tried, and that probably doesn't work too well either. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think you got to be blessed with a wife and a family that
Yeah.
understand where you are, and you know, so many things center around coaching, meals and whatever else may be, and I was very, very fortunate, and still am with my kids and my wife. They understood, and I try to go along halfway toward them, but like I say, you're so consumed with what's going on. You know, ball game after ball game, classes, you're teaching your classes, you want to do a good job in the classroom, so you put things in perspective and sort them out.
My wife always used the term tunnel vision. She always claims I have tunnel vision, and I think that's it. And you tend to focus on one thing, and there's no way you can focus on one thing without taking something away from something else. So whether it's your family or whether it's, it could be most anything, but I think that, I think when you're busy with one project, whether it be coaching or something else has to give a little bit. And what that happens to be could be a lot of different things. Yeah.
A good diversion for me was have the fortunate experience of having 3 kids that were athletes, and that kind of took the pressure off or made me focus on something a little different. My daughter went to the University of Illinois on a full ride, played 4 years. My son was my captain and played, you know, for me at Armstrong. My younger son was a Olympic weightlifter, and by the way, he just got hired by Google. He's out in California, and he's starting a Google weightlifting club.
Ooh.
And he's kind of put together like his dad, you know, kind of big up here. And he told me the other day he did. If any of you are interested or know anything about a deadlift, that's where you take the bar and you just lift it up off the ground and hold it. And he did 500 pounds the other day, and he said, I couldn't do that when I was 30 years old. Now he's, 45, and he thinks he's in the best condition of his life. So anyway, what I'm saying is my kids seem to me, as I look back, to be a good diversion because I followed them closely, and And they provided me with a lot of positive lifestyle that I think helped me in my coaching.
When you guys were, when you had a big game, say on a Friday night, during the day in school when you're teaching, did you find, because as a player, I couldn't not think about what was going to happen that night and how important, how much I cared about the result that night. As a coach, was it kind of the same thing? You'd kind of get distracted thinking about what was going to take place as a coach?
Well, somebody
that night?
said you're consumed. I think that's a pretty good response to your question. So if you're consumed, it's going to take quite a diversion to take your mind off the game that night. If you're teaching whatever you're teaching, I think it would come in and in spurts, and you'd think you got to do this or you got to do that, or where's my coach going to scout? And it was always there, but it came in spurts, and you lose track, and then you would reignite, and you had to deal with it.
So it was like that. You guys had a hard time keeping your mind off the game that night, even as a coach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably true. Yep.
All right, next question. This is a good question. Early in the season, how did you know that you're going to have a good team? So early in the season, what were the indicators there that kind of told you that we have something that could be special here? Anything that jumped at you guys as you were coaching in a season?
Well, I think you can add 2 and 2 together. If you got kids coming back and you got experience, and you got a good point guard that can handle the ball, and you got a post player that can rebound and score. Hey, we're going to have some fun this year. And on the other hand, you might overlook some things and be disappointed. But Kevin, I think you could tell based on the previous year and who's coming up from the sophomore and JV teams, and I think it was up to us then to mold that potential that you think is going to occur and not be disappointed at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have expectations based on who's returning and like you say, who's coming up. And I guess you hope that you can meet those expectations, and sometimes you're disappointed and sometimes you have your expectations are reached and then some. So you never really know for sure, but I think you have a pretty good idea of you've been around for a while, you know the other teams in the league that you're facing, you know what you've got, and I think you're pretty realistic as far as what you expect to happen.
Then there's also the kid that you don't really count on that comes along, and all of a sudden he's done some work over the summer, which you try to, encourage him to do, and all of a sudden he makes a big difference, and you knock off some team on the first part of the season, and they just build with that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Greg?
Yeah, I think expectations are, usually coaches don't have realistic thoughts. I mean, we have to be optimistic, that we can do this. And I know our level of play is here, but I think if we do these things, we can overachieve, and so you just, I think that's the exciting part about coaching is when you get that team that wasn't supposed to be so good, and all of a sudden they overachieved and just everything worked well. So mostly, but you have to have high expectations too, even if you're not going to be that good. You got to believe you will.
What was more exciting as a coach? Watching a team you didn't expect have success, or to live up to expectations when the expectations were high to begin with? What was more satisfying?
One thing that was exciting for me, I think, was we had a team in 78 that John Sherman from the Sun had picked us last. He had 1 through 9 or whatever it was, and we were dead last. And we always remembered that. And we won the division that year. We won the final. The last game was over at Fridley, and we won the Red Division, and mainly because I think we won 9 or 10 games like 1, 2, or 3 points. They were just close, right down the wire. But that last game, we had John come in the locker room, take a picture of the team, and everybody reminded John of his prediction. And I've still got that big picture hanging on the wall and so on. And so there's a case where, yeah, they exceeded all expectations. Yep.
Anybody else? Teams that did more than you thought they were going to at the start of the season, or teams that kind of lived up to the hype or the expectation? What was more enjoyable for you as a coach?
Well, it's always more enjoyable if they exceed the expectations. And I really enjoyed the Lake Conference. And we've talked about how we had good camaraderie, get together with the wives and all that. And but for me, to schedule non-conference games, for some reason, it seemed like we were more competitive. I don't know if it was the fact that we hadn't developed a tradition like some of you guys have done, but I think that was one of the major things that I had a challenge in coaching, was to develop those expectations, because I think especially early on, because the players I had were did not have high regard for themselves. So that was a challenge, to try to develop confidence. And I remember working on that, and I always think about my old college coach. As much as he went downhill in his later years, and not to mention names, but he would work on confidence. And one thing he would give you an example, is if a player had a bad shooting percentage from the free throw line, he'd put him on the line, and then he'd stand behind that person. Now we're talking psychology here and trying to build confidence. And he'd watch him shoot maybe 10 free throws. And he was good at this. And then he would point out minor adjustments, get the hand out, get whatever it was, follow through a little more, get a little more arch on your shot. So then the next amount of free throws that the player shot, when he made 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row, he'd stop him and say, now you are a free thrower. Now you're going to score from the free throw line. And obviously that stuck with me because I'm telling you about it. And I use that in my coaching, trying to develop some positive reinforcement. And sometimes it works, and sometimes you fall right on your face.